Hi there, welcome to CriminOlly. Today I'm going to be talking about this book, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino. Obviously Tarantino is a very familiar name to everyone through his films, but this is the first book he's written. It's actually part of a 2-book deal. I've got no idea what the second book's going to be, but on the basis of this one I'm very excited to see what he does next. So this is a novelisation of his movie that came out a couple of years ago. I saw the movie only quite recently, just before reading the book, and really enjoyed it. I've had problems with some of his films, but this one I thought was a really, really good one. And so I was really keen to see and very interested to see what he did with the novelisation. Now, I've been a huge fan of movie novel tie-ins since I was a kid. So that was a very long time ago, and back in those days, pre-VHS, it was very difficult often to see films if you missed them at the cinema. You'd have to wait kind of 4 years for them to turn up on TV. So my first experience of many films, including things like Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark and so on, was actually reading the novels that were based on the screenplays rather than watching the films. And as I grew older, that continued. So back then in the 80s, during the video nasty boom in the UK, a lot of horror films were banned, and that was something that I'd kind of got really interested in. So I got very into reading novelizations of horror movies, A, because I wasn't old enough to see them, and B, because some of them just weren't available in the UK at all. So again, many of my first experiences of movies like Alien was reading the book, and I had at one point absolutely loads of them, which sadly I sold some time ago and now miss. Anyway, I was very interested to see what Tarantino did in this book, adapting his screenplay. Nowadays, with streaming services giving us movies all the time, novelizations are a lot less common than they were. Used to be that pretty much every movie that came out would have a novel that went with it, but nowadays that's much less common. And what's also very uncommon is for the screenwriter and director to actually write the novelisation of a book. So I was really interested to see what Tarantino did here. And what he does is really, really interesting. So he takes the characters and the story, but flips them on their head a little bit. So all the characters will be familiar if you've seen the film, and there are lots of scenes that will be familiar, but the kind of tone changes quite dramatically. So whereas the film has some very cinematic visual scenes of violence, those are much less frequent in the book, and it feels like a more measured take on the story as a result. So I really like the film. I particularly like the ending, and I think I don't want to spoil either the film or the book, but let's just say that Tarantino gives a very different take on things in the book, and I really appreciated that. It feels like very much a companion piece to the film that gives you a bit more insight into the characters. The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly was the presentation of the book. Whilst I love old paperbacks and things like that, I'm not one of those people who likes the presentation of books more than the content. So for me, it's always about the stories. But this particular book is really beautifully presented. So I'm going to flip the camera now and give you a quick look at it. So here's the book, close up. You can see nice movie tie-in style cover with some photos from the film, and similarly on the back, and then flipping through it, what you've got rather nicely at the back are adverts for other movie tie-ins, which are quite nicely done. So completely unrelated to this book, but very much the kind of thing you would have seen in a 70s movie tie-in, which is what this is trying to evoke. Including an advert for Ride a Wild Bronc, which is the book that Leonardo DiCaprio's character is reading in the movie. It turns out not to actually be a real book, although Marvin H. Albert is a real writer, and I'll be doing a review of one of his books soon. There's also an advert for an Elmore Leonard book, which feels very appropriate. I think Leonard was a big influence on Tarantino. And I think you can feel that in this book and in the screenplay for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's got a kind of a bit of a Leonard feel to it. So anyway, the one thing that's missing, which did disappoint me a bit, as a fan of novelisations is normally, or certainly in the old days, you used to get a big chunk of colour photos in the middle. Sadly, those are missing here. It would have been nice to see a few pages of stills from the film, but aside from that, it's a really nicely put together package. One of the concerns I had going into the book was that Tarantino's skill as a screenwriter and director wouldn't translate into prose, but that was unfounded. It's actually a really nicely written book. I really enjoyed the prose. It's easy to read, but there's a lot of wit in his prose as well. So I found it, thoroughly entertaining as a novel, rather than just as an adaptation of the movie. So in summary, I really enjoyed Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. If you're a Tarantino fan, I think you'll like it. If you like the film, I think you'll like it too. It's, as I said, a really interesting companion to the film, and definitely worth your time. So hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments if you've read Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and what you thought of it. Let me know what you thought of the video as well. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. I'm aiming to get a video up, or a couple of videos up a week. So watch out for new ones. I'm also doing a daily What Am I Reading check-in on YouTube Short, so check that out too. And in the meantime, if you're not already a subscriber, please hit that button. It would be really appreciated. And if you've enjoyed the video, please hit like. Thanks for watching. See you soon.